Their interceptors slipped out of hyperspace at the very edge of the Utapau system, near the poisoned world of Flaws situated on the opposite end of the system from their target planet. As usual, Anakin arrived first, with Obi-Wan arriving moments later. As per their plan, the assault force was situated several hyperspace lanes away, just close enough to hit the enemy and surprise but far enough to give Anakin, Obi-Wan and the Jedi Strike Team room to breathe for the other objective. Anakin misliked deceiving Cody, as did Obi-Wan, but the situation was what it was, and even his master seemed to visibly relax being away from the vigilance. When a man who disliked flying as much as Obi-Wan did, preferred it to staying anywhere else, it spoke volumes. So, they played things as one would expect, Anakin being reckless and Obi-Wan trying to rein him in with a fair few jabs thrown at who owed who for which save. It was almost fun enough to make them both forget how much had changed. R2, he called out to the astromech, breaking radio silence. What are you picking from the welcoming committee? His domed head swirled inside the vacuum of space while a series of chirps and beeps resounded via the interceptor's internal communications systems. As far as R2 could tell from his short and long-range scanners, nothing at all was out of the ordinary. No one was moving to attack them, no one was there, period. Nothing one could see with conventional means anyhow. Time to see if my latest scheme will work out, Anakin sighed, relaxing his whole body inside the familiar and welcoming interior of the starfighter. Trust in the Force, my friend, and it shall provide the answers. Anakin accepted the advice, nodding across the vacuum at Obi-Wan, who sent an encouraging smile his way. With another relaxing exhale, he remembered the lessons with Master Yoda and Master T and reached out into the Force. It began slowly, extending past the immediate vicinity of himself and Obi-Wan, past the void of space, past the poisoned ruin that was Flaws, zipping past stars with hyperspace-like speed. The difference between doing it there and on Coruscant was striking enough to make him reflexively gasp. The dark side was far less potent here, its miasma almost completely situated around the deepest depths of the Utapau. Everything else was impossibly clear. Anakin could almost breathe in the toxic fumes of Flaws beneath them, hovering in the atmosphere. He could feel the lava heat on his skin from the rivers of Tictus searing across the entire surface. He could hear the indigenous bird creatures of Unistros call out to him as though he were mere inches away instead of an entire system. Even the chilling void of space, which he never feared, showcased a form of cool energy all on its own, a welcoming sensation keeping his senses from being overwhelmed from too many things at once. Was this how the Force once felt, before the return of the Sith? During the height of the Republic's long-gone Golden Age? Was this the universe Obi-Wan and countless other Jedi of his generation once enjoyed and was robbed from them? A universe Anakins and those even younger never fully experienced? No, it was there, scattered about but present. Anakin had simply never felt the need to reach out this far. It cast a melancholy shadow on an otherwise fantastic experience. But this too he let slip out into the Force, along with his distracting thoughts and feelings. There would be enough time to enjoy sensations like this when the war was won and the Force was hopefully put to balance again. Narrowing focus on Utapau itself first, Anakin circumnavigated past the faint disturbances of the dark side there. Though their minds were alien to his own, Master Yoda said there were certain sensations in the Force shared by all, detectable and discernible by any Jedi skilled enough to find them. Fear was one, along with happiness, worry, excitement. The native species of Utapau were sorely deadlocked in the negative spectrum. As Anakin searched further inside the depths of their mountainous sinkholes, he encountered sensations from the wildlife there as well. Near the bottom of one particular sinkhole, Anakin sensed a pulsating, mutilated sensation of constant anger permeating from the depths of the planet like a beacon. He'd sensed it days ago when it was mere inches away from his body. "Grievous is down there," Anakin said in a cool, detached voice. "And Dooku? I don't see him, not like I did when they attacked Coruscant. He's either not there, or Sidious sensed my heightened Force perceptions back home and told his apprentice to keep a low profile," Anakin thought, trying in vain to sense any kind sign for the Count. Dooku was there on the planet. Faint traces of his Force signature lingered in the air the same way exhaust from a waste disposal plant poisoned the air. But it was faint, like the paw print of an animal a few days old. What of Gunray and the Separatist Council? They're not on Utapau. Anakin removed himself from that planet upon another, closer examination. They would have stuck out like Grievous amidst the native populace. With the same precise focus, He diverted his force focus onto every single other planet, zeroing in on whatever or whoever was located on them. A process made quite a bit easier than he feared it would be thanks to several factors. The first was the Utapau system itself. Most of it was uninhabited by any life whatsoever, such as tictors or floors. The only signature from there belonged to the natural occurrences on their surfaces. The second was how droids stuck out and missed the other energies of the Force. They didn't exist in it, not like most other things or people. On the various moons littering the star system, Anakin felt how they stuck out from everything around them, like stones interrupting a river. Yet, even within these disturbances in the universe's flow, there was life, alien life forms completely distinct from anything else on the system. A very mixed group of them in particular hid on what appeared to be a small, emergency escape vessel parked on one of the moons of Barbili. Anakin couldn't help but smile in satisfaction. There on the farthest most moon on Barbili. Alone? So it would seem. It looks like Grievous or Dooku or Sidious, or Palpatine, he silently added, are prioritizing them getting away while the rest of us are busy fighting. Can't have that. Certainly not. Anakin turned the engines back on, coordinates set for Utapau. The green-brown world grew with their approach, Anakin letting his pure flight instincts do the driving while his force perceptions kept looking for Dooku. As a pure military and political necessity, the Count being absent didn't matter. With Grievous dead and the Separatist Council captured, even he couldn't hope to hold it all together. The war would be won. As far as ordinary people were concerned, but for a Jedi, having a Sith Lord still out there was a greater threat than 10,000 confederacies, especially one like Dooku. Anakin kept prodding through the Force, sometimes with more of his own will commanding the search but more often allowing the Force itself to lead him to where he wanted to go. Neither method gave him the answer he wanted. Dooku wasn't there, and it took at least 3 calming breaths for his jaw to unclench itself at the thought of him slithering about somewhere else while they were here. It helped that he could practically feel Obi-Wan's jaw clench when the turbulence started banging them inside their cockpits. The hyperwinds of Utapau lived up to their reputation, transforming the entire surface into a blasted, uninhabitable rock that would have made Tatooine look accommodating. Even the upper levels of the sinkhole city weren't completely protected, with semi-hurricanes necessitating massive wind turbines nearly as blasted as the surface of the planet to redirect the worst of their effects away. Midway through the city, the turbulence finally stopped, and so did their descent on top of a large but busy landing pad. Before their starfighters even touched down, Anakin already sensed the presence of creatures moving toward them. The first group was a pack of chubby, brown-skinned creatures with big, black eyes and large oblong heads wearing engineering equipment and carrying ship maintenance tools. Anakin recognized them immediately. These were the Utai, a species who didn't care for administration or politics and willingly took up the social position of manual labor within Utapau's society. Behind this group, at a slower pace, approached Paul, and clad in black and red robes, a staff whose black eyes glistened in the sun outside. "Seems we're expected," Obi-Wan commented, opening his cockpit up. Anakin decided to let his master take the lead there while he kept a very close eye on their starfighters. The Utai didn't seem treacherous from what he could tell, but there were alien species out there whose minds were difficult to discern, even for a Jedi. "You know what to do if they try something, R2?" The astromech beeped affirmatively, swiveling his dome in the direction of the nearest Utai. "Greetings, Master Jedi," the portent spoke with a heavy accent. "I am Tion Medan, Master of Port Administration on this peaceful world. What, may I ask, brings you to us?" "Greetings, Master Medan," Obi-Wan bowed. "I will be blunt, for our time is short. We are here because of the war." "There is no war here unless you've brought it with you." The pulsating fear radiating from Medan was almost like standing inches away from a starfighter jet. Though his face, body and even voice were the picture-perfect examples of serenity, on the inside he was almost shivering from terror. For himself, for his people, and what the Jedi arrival would mean for both of them. Deciding that R2 had their starfighters covered, Anakin stepped a few inches closer to Medan. "We're here to help," Anakin said in a calming voice, waving a hand and trying to ease the administrator's worries. "You don't have to tell us where he is, we already know. Please, go find someplace safe and hide. Warn the rest of your citizens to do the same. For those who want to fight, tell them to wait, we'll be getting back up soon enough. They'll know it when they see it." The effect on Medan wasn't immediate, but it was potent. The nearly palpable fear diminished to a sensible worry, and the towering being seemed to shrink right in front of them as some of his burdens eased away. "I will do as you instruct, Master Jedi. May the gods watch over you in the times to come." Anakin and Obi-Wan accepted this with silent, polite nods, observing Medan fade away back deeper into the current level of the city. The Utai followed suit, excitedly talking to one another, no doubt impressed by the starfighters. "Well done." Obi-Wan's hand rested on Anakin's left shoulder. "A little peace of mind never hurt anyone." Returning to their ships, R2 beeped and chirped, saying the Utai only did some basic checkup and maintenance work. Though one did try to prod a little more than necessary next to the fuel cells, a quick ignition of them made him back off. Anakin laughed. "Good work, pal. Now," he leaned closer, voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Remember what we talked about on the trip over here? Now's the time to do it." "That goes for you as well, Jeanine." Obi-Wan spoke to the astromech droid inside his interceptor. "Follow absolutely everything R2 instructs to the letter, am I understood?" Both astromechs gave affirmative chirps and beeps. R2 had been fully briefed on the situation all the way back in the innermost sections of the temple where no one could possibly find out. Some of the council voiced doubt about his capabilities, but Anakin and, surprisingly enough, even Obi-Wan, vouched for the astromech's skills, cunning, and most importantly, his discretion. The only way R2 would ever reveal a secret is if you broke his legs and sliced into him for a month. Either one is far easier said than done. Jeanine was picked up in the temple as well, extensively checked by Anakin and R2 both, and programmed with certain behavioral modifiers, such subservience to R2's directives. With their orders given, the droids fired up both ships and slowly lifted themselves off the landing bay. Anakin and Obi-Wan watched them rise higher and higher until their shapes disappeared into the searing, brown hyperwinds devouring the uppermost section of the city. Then even the sounds of their engines vanished amidst this noise. It was just the team left, for now. "Shall we?" Obi-Wan asked, breaking the silence. Anakin waved an open hand towards the edge of the landing bay. "After you, Master." Stepping closer to it, Obi-Wan took out a pair of electro-binoculars and aimed it towards the level Anakin pointed out to him. The tenth or so of the city where one could, even from several levels high above, notice grey and black spheroid shapes along with several spires matching their appearance jutting out from the rocks. Droid control antennas. While his teacher observed them that way, Anakin reached into the Force once again and attempted to sense out any more surprises potentially waiting for them down there, zipping past the fears, anxieties, but also a fresh rush of renewed hope from the occupied populace. Grievous radiated as always, standing as still as a statue. There was absolutely nothing else alive there with him, not the natives, separatist leaders, or a Sith Lord. What he could perceive were dozens upon dozens more blockages in Grievous' nearby vicinity. The place was teeming with battle droids, a small army's worth. "Still no sign of our dear friend the Count?" "No, but Grievous isn't lacking for company down there. Company that may prove troublesome should they decide to intervene in our duel." "True," Anakin admitted, "fighting Grievous alone or with the Magna Guard would be a challenge, but something they could deal with. Having hundreds of blaster bolts buzzing around at the same time though. But, if we put enough of a good show for the General, and we most certainly will, he'll do something stupid like give us an actual fighting chance just so he can kill us personally." "Well then," Obi-Wan said nonchalantly, putting the binoculars back into his belt, "let's not keep him waiting." Anakin was about to point out they lacked the means to do that with no starfighter or any other means of transportation around. The words never came out, for a bellowing series of cries cut through the wind noise made them both halt in their tracks. "Suubatars?" Obi-Wan said, taking point. "The creatures from Anshan?" Anakin asked, mind whirling past the 3 years of war to a simpler time when the biggest worry he had was not disappointing his master. It was one of their last missions before the entire galaxy was thrown into chaos, but in hindsight, a precursor to the splintering of the Republic that was to come. "Not precisely, though I have a feeling their UTAPE or an equivalent will prove no less useful." Obi-Wan sent an amused glance Anakin's way. "Assuming you're up for a living mount." "We all must do things we dislike, Master, in these trying times." Anakin looked at him the same way. "Such as flying." Banter aside, they both knew the truth behind Obi-Wan's words. Anakin intensely disliked using living mounts. Anything with a mind of its own put him on edge, particularly in situations such as these where they'd be traversing stories worth of Sinkhole City. Obi-Wan once said a machine didn't care whether or not it or its master crashed. Anakin retorted they did what they were told at all times. They left the landing pad behind, moving into the shadows of hallways carved into the sandstone, the only source of illumination coming from lamp rods dangling overhead, casting a yellow hue over everything. Eventually, the single-line hallway opened up into a circularly carved room of substantial proportions, big enough to fit 5 or 6 interceptors inside. The room consisted of 2 levels, an upper one with a balcony overseeing an arena-like lower level via a series of ramps connecting the two. In this arena, though a pen was a better name for it, were a dozen large, reptile quadrupeds. With large, beaked faces, scaly bodies stretching out to 15 meters and 4 meters in height, they looked like some distant cousin of Tatooine's krayt dragons. What took away from their imposing first impressions was the calm, even lazy for some way they squatted or laid about the pen, allowing Utai wranglers to wash them down, offer them food. Descending down the ramp, Obi-Wan approached the nearest wrangler and gestured, reaching out through the Force. "My friend and I require transportation." The Utai's bulging eyes stared at him, growing wider and glossier until he nodded. Obi-Wan sent another suggestion his way. "If you would be so kind as to give us 2 saddles." Following another nod, the wrangler left for a saddle rack away from the dragon mounts. While they waited, the 2 Jedi walked closer amongst the creatures. Obi-Wan looked at them with more interest than Anakin, passing by several green, brown and orange ones before stopping at one who didn't shy away from his touch or tried to overly endear itself by drawing attention to itself. The creature had a calm, intelligent look in its eyes and accepted a sheaf of grass from a nearby bin with no qualms. Anakin, meanwhile, heard the rumbling noise of an orange mount just to his right. While it appeared lazy, sprawled out on its belly, arms stretched wide, the yellow eyes looking at him showed interest and challenge. Peering out into the Force, he remembered sensing the sensation of the creatures through the Force, and this one was certainly shining brighter than the rest. He stood half a meter taller than Obi-Wan's mount and was far more pig-headed. Instead of being annoyed by this, however, Anakin found himself more drawn to the creature, staring back at it without even the tiniest shred of fear or hesitation. The mount snorted and, following a quick stretch, rose to full height, towering over Anakin, each stomp of his feet reverberating across the cavern. The other nearby mounts reflexively moved away from him. Then, the creature leaned its face mere inches away from Anakin's, the rumbling in its throat louder and its interest intensified. Anakin did not move or say anything, he merely stood before the dragon and felt perfectly at ease. Soon enough, the orange mount let out a loud huff and moved again, showing Anakin his side and sitting gently on the rocky floor. With his living hand, Anakin gently stroked the creature's surprisingly soft skin, hiding a body built by years of climbing vast, incredibly dangerous sinkholes. "You've got attitude," he smirked, patting the dragon's belly. "But so do I." The Utai shuffled over to them, stopping to stare at Anakin and the mount, his surprise apparent through the Force. Evidently this one really was a troublemaker. With their saddles placed, they took the reins of the creatures. Obi-Wan and his executed it as though they'd been partners for years. Anakin, meanwhile, had to stop a moment and adjust, but he wasn't alone. The mount seemed just as surprised to be equally unadjusted to this situation. Instead of fighting back against him, Anakin merely slipped deeper into the Force, letting his own relaxation affect the mount. Eventually, his muscles relaxed imperceptibly and the loud huffing eased to a gentle breathing pattern. "Boga," the Utai said, pointing at his master's mount. "For Anakin's," he said Dobu. "Thank you very much," Obi-Wan smiled, nodding at the Utai. "My companion and I cannot offer you monetary compensation, would do solemnly vow to free your world from tyranny." "I don't think he understands." The Utai's head tilted to the side and confused, almost bug-like star confirmed as much. "Ah yes, quite right, well." Without another word the wrangler wouldn't have understood anyway. Obi-Wan gently nudged Boga forward and the dragon mount honked, rising on 2 legs before taking off like a green blur. Not to be outdone, Anakin's own charged after her in a rush that would have been the envy of a speeder, if speeders could feel envy anyway. In a matter of moments, the dimly lit cavern gave way to open, clear sky, along with a fantastic view of the almost bottomless-looking pit underneath. In a single bound, both dragons leapt across from the exit all the way to an adjacent, metal balcony, and without losing a moment's stride, kept leaping on, and on the way down, with the same practiced ease a Jedi Knight wields a saber, the creatures skillfully and easily jumped down from level to level, never over or under-exerting themselves. Claws easily ripping into stone or even steel, and their heads whipping this way and that with perfect situational awareness. What was impressive about the ride down, besides the thrill of leaping across such a vast chasm and the wind whipping in his face, was how Anakin didn't need to do anything at all. Neither did Obi-Wan. Without warnings or prompts or commands, the mounts simply knew what their riders wanted and the best way to get there. This free ride also gave him a chance to further examine the city and to truly feel how deserted much of it was becoming. Meaden had heeded their advice well. Sources of fear and worry vanished further away from the countless balconies and landing pads across the city. The beings who were staying to fight did so with a tangible desire for revenge fueled by a sense of hope. Sobering up from the rush, Anakin silently vowed to make sure their hopes weren't misplaced just as Boga and Dobu jumped and landed like phantoms into the archway of level 10, just above where Grievous was. With equally surprising and skillful grace, the dragon mounts gently traversed the length of the archway, their massive frames producing no noise at all against the durasteel their claws banged against. Eventually, the archway began to split open, revealing a towering hall underneath. A hall filled to the brim with every single battle droid ever produced by the Confederacy, all of them making a very poor show of not waiting for, say, 2 Jedi to drop at any moment. 7 figures stood out amongst them, Grievous and 6 of his Magna Guard, looking out at a docking bay in front of them. With a deep breath, Anakin made one last effort to find Dooku, hoping that their vicinity might provoke a reaction from the Count. During their duel on Geonosis, the ex-master of Qui-Gon seemed immovable, his demeanor never giving way to panic or even anger. But on the invisible hand, Anakin and Obi-Wan both saw Dooku could be intimidated and shaken like any other man, and having the people responsible for that humiliation might make him shake again. That was the logic Anakin kept in mind with every search. Again, nothing. Well then, we shall see if it is so, Obi-Wan commented, no doubt taking the slight grimace on Anakin's face for an answer. No sense in keeping them waiting for much longer. Right, Anakin dismounted along with him, casting aside his longer Jedi robes. But before they turned this place into a free-fire zone, they had one more thing to do. Looking back at the dragons, Anakin found Dobu looking at him again, head held high but not out of challenge, just a quiet acceptance that they were parting ways. It was eerily familiar to a Jedi. Obi-Wan took a more personal approach with Boga, gently rubbing her beak and whispering for her to leave. Moving away from the creatures, Anakin and Obi-Wan moved to the edge of the archway, lightsabers in both hands and bodies ready for battle. They did not say anything to one another, merely letting the calming effect of immersion in the Force and each other's presence wash over them. It reminded Anakin of being back on Coruscant with his family the night before. With a glance and nod to each other, the two friends leapt from the archway and landed in an almost glide gently onto the floor. None of the droids so much as glanced in their direction. At that moment, Anakin sensed something else from his old teacher, a wry bit of amusement at the tip of his tongue. With a nod, he told Obi-Wan to go for it. Hello there. Neither one of them moved when the air became filled with the noise of a small droid army near instantaneously reacting to Obi-Wan's greeting. The stomping of metal feet repositioning themselves. The ground-shaking thumps of large, spider legs. The whirs and clicks of several thousand machines moving into firing position, aiming an equal number of blasters at the intruders. The Jedi didn't even activate their lightsabers or grace the enemy with even a glance. The only droids who interested them broke the silence with the rhythmic, mechanical clanking of durasteel feet and claws against a floor of the same material. Anakin and Obi-Wan watched the arm directly ahead disperse at their leader's approach as though Grievous was moving them aside like a sea of metal with the Jedi's command of the Force. His Magna Guard, all equipped with their signature staff weapons, followed him with 3 on each side. Their little greeting party stopped 80 feet away from the Jedi, with only their only movements the nearly imperceptible glances from Grievous' slit eyes. His black cape parted, revealing the 6-fingered mechanical hands resembling his original, Kalish body. They held no lightsabers, though both of the Jedi caught glances of his hidden collection but faced upward at a 45-degree angle. Kenobi, Skywalker, I bid you welcome to Utapau, he bowed, inclining his head to both of them. As your host today, how may I be of service? Willingly placing yourself under our arrest would be a start, Obi-Wan replied. Telling us anything we want to know would work too, Anakin added. A rumbling, metallic laugh reverberated through whatever was left of his lungs and throat. Unfortunately, I cannot fulfill either request. But I would be most grateful if you respect my rules as master of the house and promptly die like the vermin you are. Guess we're going to be poor guests. Anakin ignited his lightsaber. Obi-Wan did no such thing. Through the Force, Grievous' brief facade of congeniality evaporated and the seething, pure hatred of all Jedi exploded out like a torrent of wind in their faces. The knights weathered it without a flinch. The bio-droid's eyes narrowed. Kill them. Stepping back to give his bodyguards more space, Grievous melted in the rapidly growing circular room being afforded to the battle at hand. All while the lesser droids kept every single one of their thousands of blasters perpetually trained at the team. The 6 Magna Guard stepped forward, first with slow, methodical steps. Their hands activating the currents of each electrostaff, filling the air with a grating, buzzing noise resembling a hive of Corellian raptor wasps. Without even looking at one another, Anakin and Obi-Wan both took steps away from another, dividing the enemy force by taking 3 each. Anakin kept his saber in a perpetual low guard, giving him a posture of laziness or absolute arrogance further enhanced by his immersion in the Force. Its soothing effect relaxing his body until the moment it was necessary to fight. Obi-Wan followed his principle with an even greater display of calm by still refusing to ignite his weapon, even as the Magna Guard's methodical walk became faster and faster. Particularly his trio, Anakin's were far warier. Anakin let them get close enough to encircle them, not even bothering to look as they spun and twirled their staffs this way and that. Even their feints failed to elicit so much as a flinch. No, he only responded when the Force said it was time. It came soon enough when the Magna Guard directly ahead jabbed his weapon forward in a stabbing motion aimed for Anakin's chest. His partner directly behind the Jedi went for the knees while the one to Anakin's immediate right swung to cut off his saber hand. Instead, the hand shot in the direction of the droid, hurtling him back enough with a force push. Anakin's saber swung from right to left, smacking the forward attacker to such a degree it stumbled off to the side or suffer a crippling decapitation. The last of them, still going for the knees, was met with nothing but empty air. Anakin had already used the momentum of his swing to perform a quick, spinning jump on the spot. If the last bodyguard attacker had gone for a stab instead of a swing, the Jedi's boot would have landed right onto the staff and left its owner completely vulnerable to a beheading. Not that Anakin couldn't have dispatched all 3 of them already, they simply needed to keep Grievous distracted for a while longer. Just enough to keep him occupied without annoying him enough to open a 1,000-droid salvo on them. And so, he feinted a miss, grazing the final guard's shoulder but otherwise letting it retreat to safety. Obi-Wan smiled blandly at his approaching adversaries, mind clear and accepting to anything and everything the Force willed. He was but an instrument to it and accepted this role with the practiced ease of decades. And so, the Force moved him unscathed through the incoming attacks. If a swing or stab was imminently close to wounding or killing him, the Force made his body move in precisely the right way and the right time to avoid any harm at all. Ducking, crouching, jumping, even positioning himself directly behind his enemies once or twice to make the guards hurt one another. He did not so much evade as almost dance through the fairly impressive series of their electro-staff motions. To the untrained eye, it would appear Obi-Wan was a foolish, self-imposed retreat, constantly giving way to the enemy and delaying the inevitable. But the Force was validating his stance on every conflict. A battle is only ever a distraction and could be countered by another, larger distraction. These motions continued on and on, Obi-Wan dancing and fully immersed in the Force while Anakin stayed an immovable object, letting the Force guide his body while his perceptions were partially occupied by matters in and outside their vicinity. Their strike wasn't coming just yet, though the Force warned it was one of 2 events in his near future. One to come soon was an explosion of rage born from Grievous' rapidly growing irritation. Though he did not say it, the General's displeasure with his so-called elite guard grew with every second they were still alive. An explosion they'd have to stamp out by goading his ego. Anakin acted first on this, sending a flash of warning for Obi-Wan who'd retreated several dozen feet behind him. With a calming breath, the young Jedi let the Force guide his next step. As such, he ducked. A stab from behind intended to pierce his neck instead shoved over a quarter of the staff through the eye socket of a guard attacking directly in front, effectively killing it. The third member, Unable to complete his overhead swing, what with his own partner's weapon in the way, hastily attempted to use this momentum and switch to a low swing instead. By the time it was halfway done, Anakin's blade was already clashing at its legs as well as the ones belonging to the recently impaled droid. The next clash on his way back up to a standing position carved both Magna Guards in two at the waist. The sole survivor jumped backward, expecting a third clash to get it as well. Anakin didn't see the need for it, their fight was already over. The droid, uselessly, tried to perform its standard spinning motions with its staff, but with its stabbed partner still lifelessly sticking out from one end, weighing it down, the motion's speed and balance were completely ruined. From crotch to head, Anakin cut the droid in half at the moment a resounding boom shook the entire hangar. At the same moment Anakin dispatched his attackers, Obi-Wan did the same, allowing himself to appear captured between the three of them. He waited and waited until the final possible instant to use some of his Ataru training and leapt high into the air and to safety. The three Magna Guard, as they'd done several times already, struck each other in the heads, shoulders or knees. In the heartbeat it would take for their computerized brains to register what happened and to swiftly recover from it, Obi-Wan already defeated them. With the barest flick of his fingers, a gargantuan crate hanging over the trio was unclasped from the ceiling, crushing them all splattered bits of durasteel. Casually, he walked past his handiwork and joined his former apprentice, sharing brief smiles with him before refocusing on their host. "Our offer still stands, General," he pleasantly told the scowling droid commander standing scarcely 40 feet away. "Surrender and no harm shall come to you." His scowl deepened, the anger at all of Jedi, but most notably at the two of them, intensifying to even greater heights. A sensation made all the more fascinating in its sheer, almost scorching magnitude when paired with an even greater, guttural laugh of his mechanical voice cords. "Harm, to me? Fools!" A series of loud clicking sounds came from underneath the cloak, alongside the twisting and turning of durasteel plates. With each one, Grievous grew to full height, well over a head taller than either of the Jedi. "I've butchered dozens of your brothers and sisters, I know everything you're capable of and more." With a dramatic flourish, the cloak parted open revealing the metal monstrosity underneath, a durasteel frame of skeletal proportions, a perverse replacement for his annihilated Kalish body. But it was also the instrument of considerable combative power, as testified by any Jedi skilled enough to survive dueling against the General, or any evidence left behind by whatever slaughter he'd performed most recently. Even Master Windu could not defeat Grievous in single combat on Coruscant, resorting to removing him from the battle. A luxury neither Anakin or Obi-Wan could afford. From inside the cloak, a series of sabers appeared within Grievous' hands. Touching them caused the General to release a sensation of pure delight and pride temporarily through the force of a hunter running his hands across well-earned trophies. This wasn't what surprised the Jedi, causing the slightest crack in their otherwise perfect demeanors. It was the fact he was holding 6 blades. 2 he dropped to the ground and with a near-deafening pounding of both clawed feet, grabbed hold of them. The other 4 were taken by his separated twin hands. A series of snap hisses ignited all 6 blades and the air around Grievous became a whirl of blinding blues and greens as he positioned each and every single weapon in a different fighting stance all at once. His upright blade was held in a single-handed overhead Jimso attack stance, his bottom right in a Neiman low guard. The upper left blade performed the Mikoshi salute while the last one entered a variation of the Ataru opening stance. And they knew he was capable of even more. The team responded as well, Anakin mirroring Grievous' Jimso stance while Obi-Wan activated his own blade into a Sorisu guard. Whatever sly bit of banter at the tip of their tongues evaporated, there was only the silent challenge of their focused looks at Grievous. The General's anger and delight both intermingled as his stomping feet moved forward, slowly, laboriously while his 4 other sabers spun through the air, continuously altering their stances in ways that would have broken an ordinary person's wrists, hands or their entire body. The 2 Jedi almost sent reassurances to one another when suddenly Grievous blazed forward with the speed of a starfighter, reducing the meager distance between them to nothing. They had no time to do anything at all but allow the Force to guide them through the whirlwind of strikes sent their way. Anything else would have gotten them both killed instantly or driven insane. With astonishing speed, ferocity, mechanical body to afford both and expert knowledge of the Jedi arts, the area directly in their surroundings became a blinding, migraine-inducing display of blue and green energies whizzing against, past and at one another. In a tenth of a second, Grievous coordinated and altered his offensive at a moment's notice. A single limb was capable of entirely switching directions, intensities, physical powers and angles of attack. To say nothing of how his body was capable of instantaneous attack and defensive measures, using some blades to deflect whatever useless blow was sent his way while his response was simultaneously sent the Jedi's way. An attack pattern only turned more randomized and fierce by the fact Grievous would suddenly and without even provocation, stand on his proper arms and allow his legs to act as his upper body, even rotating his entire lower half and transforming it into a buzzsaw. Anything but the absolute defense would have been suicide against. By some vague calculations in the team's respective minds, Grievous was averaging at the bare minimum of over 50 lightsaber strikes in a single second. Obi-Wan withstood it all with an unshakable calm. A calm provided by the Force, an absolute trust between a meager servant and a higher power guiding his hand. Moving his blade just quickly enough to divert or outright block any strike sent his way. All while using the absolute minimum of effort required for any movement. If Mace described his style as becoming immersed in Vapoid, then Obi-Wan was immersed in Sorisu. Everything he'd learned about the form, from others, and from personal experience, was at the behest of the Force. Yet alone, against a barrage of this intensity, he would have fallen. Even 20 strikes per second from 4 blades would overwhelm him. But Obi-Wan had Anakin by his side and this, he knew, would be enough. Anakin weathered the incoming storm with greater issues. He had already crossed swords with Grievous over Coruscant, but this was something entirely different. Even with the assistance of the Force, he knew in his less focused mind, he would have lost this duel without Obi-Wan there to take some of the hits away from him. Anakin's trust in the Force wasn't the issue. He let the energies of the universe itself guide him as they saw fit, and it wasn't failing him or his master so far. The problems he faced were born from style and a necessity to keep a shred of focus on matters outside the battle. Jimso was an aggressive fighting form, based around the idea of defense and then immediate counterattack. Though he was knowledgeable or proficient in other combat styles, Form V was his go-to, his first, last and only response. Against an assault of this level, half of his skills were effectively off the table. Trying to counterattack against Grievous would be suicide, leaving Anakin feeling out of options. The strike team would also hit soon and they had to forestall any efforts Grievous might take to help or prevent it. Not outright kill him, that would leave them vulnerable to roughly 10,000 blasters and no backup to ease the pressure. No, this problem would require another solution. It was then, while in the middle of blocking 12 or so lightsaber strikes, Anakin fought the urge to strike himself across the face. Grievous, while still alive, was mostly a machine. "I don't like any of this," Newt Gunray repeated to himself for what must have been the 10,000th time in the past hour alone. If he got a single credit for every time the thought or some variation of it ran through his mind since the failure at Coruscant, he would have been able to fund an entirely new fleet of separatist ships. For all the good it would do them. Being confined to a consular-class cruiser for days on end did nothing to help the feeling of melancholy washing over him and the rest of the Separatist Council on board. Palpatine was right there, in their grasp. The perfect means of crippling the Republic and buying the Confederacy much-needed political power to maneuver and bring a war to a satisfying turn for them. Yet, at the insistence of Sidious and Dooku, Palpatine was kept above Coruscant where the Jedi inevitably rescued him. All the time and more importantly money spent on nothing at all. Leaving them with no hostage and a Republic more eager to fight to the bitter end than ever before. Not that Sidious seemed to care when faced with questions on Utapau concerning their progress in the war. He showed his usual calmness, his words laced with promises and assurances that the war was nearing its end. That they would suffer no negative repercussions in the climax to come. Assurances that would have held more weight if Dooku did not leave to parts unknown and the entire council being stranded on a ship, in a system where the Republic could attack at any moment while there was a perfectly good safe haven for them on Mustafar. Was that more money wasted as well? The dark mood hung over everyone on the ship, capable of feeling one. On more than one occasion, arguments and even an exchange of blows happened between members of the council. For the past day, they all avoided one another completely, each finding some section of the ship to stand or sit in until the situation changed again. For the better, hopefully. He did not think his rattled nerves could withstand any more disasters. A loud, blaring noise suddenly exploded throughout the entire ship at once, its inside becoming bathed in intense, red light. It took all the dexterity Newt could muster to avoid smashing face first into a nearby wall after practically leaping into the air. The doorstairs room parted and on the other side stood Hako, his face contorted into a panting fit of worry and one hand desperately clutching his side. "What is it?" Newt asked, taking a step toward his old friend. "Are we under attack?" "Not us," Hako panted. "Our main force, the Jedi, are striking us from behind." "What?" Look. Reaching over to a nearby holoprojector terminal, Hako frantically, clumsily even, pressed a series of commands linking the projector to one of their strategic displays on the main assault cruisers. From there, a map of the battle sprang to life, showing a single Republic destroyer leaving hyperspace and opening fire on the nearest cruiser huddling in the dark side of a nameless moon. With an obscene fascination, Newt and Hako both silently watched its turrets open continuous fire, smashing into yet another ship that cast far more than it was worth. The vessel trying and failing to rise as a considerable portion of its engines were devastated in the initial strike alone. "Damn it," Newt shouted, watching the cruiser lift off then just as quickly descend back onto the moon, exploding into nothingness. "Fight, you fools. Don't let them take us." As though his voice was heard across the void of space, the other remaining cruisers did as told, managing to lift off from the orbits of their respective hiding places and engage the enemy properly. Soon, it was 5 against 1 and this time, the Republic were the ones sustaining considerable damage. Newt's elation was palpable but short-lived as a basic question entered his thoughts: what was Grievous doing? Why was he taking all of the vessels out from hiding? What if the Republic came at them from more unexpected directions and carved their fleet to pieces like vibro knives in the back? Get to the pilot." Newt turned to Hako, grabbing his shoulder. "Tell him to get us out of here, right now. Punch in the coordinates to Mustafar before." "Look." Staring back at the tactical display, Gunray watched with an open mouth as the Republic cruiser kept flying straight ahead, directly in the path of 2 cruisers delivering the most damage to it. No matter what their forces sent on the destroyer, it just kept flying closer and closer. It didn't take a strategic mastermind to know at least 2 of the ships would crash into one another and explode. Who was leading that ship? Was he mad? Trying to kill himself and his whole crew simply to take out their droids? Whether their forces would cut down the destroyer before a collision occurred was something Gunray would never find out. A loud, sickening crunch of durasteel accompanied by the resounding boom of an explosion came from a far end of the ship, where the engines were. The tactical display died instantly. Hako and Newt took hold of one another to hold tightly as their ship began to shake harder and harder still, as though an invisible force was plucking them from their own hiding spot. "No," Newt thought as a chilling sensation swept over his whole body. "It's a tractor beam." Grievous' leg snapped at Obi-Wan like a viper, blade deliberately pointed downward to strike at Kenobi's leg while 3 other sabers went to carve him to pieces. Skywalker intercepted these, standing at his old teacher's side and withstanding the attacks, covering for each other still. They were a formidable force, the old Kaleesh warrior begrudgingly admitted, witnessing their considerable defensive prowess firsthand for the past few minutes. No other Jedi managed to hold their own against him for so long, save for Lord Tyrannus, though considering him a Jedi would be an insult to the man. Kenobi's Saw Risu did remind Grievous of Dooku's own Makoshi, the deliberate ease of movement, not a moment wasted, no effort too small or too great. Everything Kenobi did was with calm precision. Skywalker was the weaker of the two, his offensive style deadlocked, leaving him performing a decent enough approximation of Kenobi's defensive form, but one which could not withstand an individual assault. There would be no repeat of their clash on the Invisible Hand. Skywalker's fall was a foregone conclusion and the perspiration drenching the sides of his face was all the proof Grievous needed of that. Deciding that he'd entertained himself enough, the time had come to end this battle and add 2 more very valuable blades to his collection. Letting one of his blades seemingly slip out of his grasp, Grievous watched it hang there in midair just long enough for Skywalker to take the bait, which he did by counterattacking for the first time since the beginning of their battle. With a simple wrist flick, Grievous recaptured his blade and kicked Kenobi in the gut, sending him skidding back just long enough for his student to stand alone, mid-attack and nothing else to help him. Grievous' computerized mind could already calculate what would happen next. Skywalker would move for a ferocious uppercut wing to carve Grievous in half, only for 3 other bladers to lock down his own, leaving 3 more to cut him down with. And so it came to pass, The hero with no fear attacked and in so doing sealed his fate. Then, something else happened, something Grievous did not account for. Skywalker's blade shrank. Mere moments before it would have gotten locked amidst three of Grievous, the Jedi pressed his lightsaber's activation button, letting the blade shrink just enough to pass harmlessly past Grievous' own. Then he pressed it again and the general watched with disturbing clarity as Skywalker's sword returned to full height and very nearly took his entire left shoulder off. Registering the immediate danger, Grievous jumped back only to spot a shadow passing over his head, Kenobi, jumping ahead and over the biodroid, cleaving the fingers and blade of his upper left hand clean away. With a guttural growl, Grievous spun his entire torso in a rapid series of buzzsaw motions, intending to cover his front and back against both of the Jedi. Instead of being intimidated by this display, Skywalker rushed headlong into it, pulling his upper body back into a stabbing motion. This attack was but a feint. While Grievous prepared to meet the young Jedi, his master was the one to block two of Grievous' blades, grinding his teeth and entire body with just enough force to prevent the spinning from happening anymore. Skywalker, meanwhile, swung for the general's feet and carved both lightsabers away from them. Snapping at the Jedi with his newly freed claws, Skywalker jumped aside, as did Kenobi, unable to prevent the motors from spinning Grievous' body any longer. Not that the general stayed there himself, leaping closer to one group of droids and putting distance between himself and the Jedi. Though they were noticeably tired, panting and drenched in sweat, Kenobi and Skywalker exuded an infuriating calm. No, not simply calm, but arrogant belief they had defeated him. The very idea sent a burning pulse of anger to rush through Grievous' entire being, setting even the durasteel frame on fire with pure loathing. Snapping his blades into a ready position, he gave off the impression of moving to attack. In truth, he would use the Jedi's momentary return to a ready stance to address his troops. Kill them. Kill them both. The command resounded profoundly in his head, but never came out. Not only did the droids, useless pieces of tin scrap that they were, remain standing there as nothing at all happened, but Grievous' own voice wasn't working. Blinking in surprise and fury, he yelled more orders at them, again and again with nothing to show for it. It was as if someone had turned off his vocal cords. But how could that be? Then his eyes momentarily glanced at Skywalker, and from that arrogant youth's smile, he knew the answer. The bastard had used the Force to damage his body. Grievous had heard of boys' prowess with machines, but to rewire Grievous' own settings in the middle of a fight with him was insane. "Surrender, General," Kenobi spoke, the bland smile on his face gone, replaced by a look of detached finality. "We will not offer this to you again." His reply was a silent snarl and a lunge. Grievous switched over to a form he'd only recently acquired, the one known as Vaporide from its sole master, Mace Windu itself. It was Geo taken to its nth degree, aggression and overwhelming force personified. Even Windu himself could not defeat Grievous during their skirmish atop the train, and neither would Kenobi's defenses withstand. Skywalker appeared before him, just as on the invisible hand, and this time, he did not hesitate to attack. Holding his ground with a look of focused determination, the hero with no fear lived up to his name, standing there, an immovable object, responding to every single strike sent his way. It did no matter what Grievous did, which angle he struck from, which form he randomly came at him from, Skywalker met it and returned with twice, no thrice the speed and sheer attacking power. In a matter of moments, Grievous was the one who found himself pushed back to Kenobi, who once again moved as silent as a phantom, appearing at Grievous' side and carving his lower right arm away. Grievous kept lashing out, trying to cut them down, trying to make them pay for this humiliation. For what they, their order and their republic did to him and his home. Pure, seething anger overcame all reason. He did not care if he died there so long as he took just these two more Jedi with him to death as well. It wasn't until he heard the hiss of lightsaber carving through metal 2 more times did a warning register from the computer built into his brain. Blinking at the 4 stumps that were once his arms, Grievous realized how true his prediction of death was. Just long enough for a horrible fear unlike any he'd felt in years to overtake him, and long enough for Skywalker and Kenobi to cut his head off. The sounds of battle echoed throughout the ship, even past the thick doors leading out into the hallway. Newt and Harko sat huddled in the corner, jumping and cowering more and more with every blaster battle and whoosh of a lightsaber. Just under the crack of the door, they could see the flash of lights, hearing the clanking of battle droids falling and the barks of Republic forces. Were he in a saner state of mind, Newt would have realized the voices sounded strange, lacking the distinct dialect of Jango Fett found in all clones. A curious thing he soon ignored when a green lightsaber carved its way through the door, causing him and Harko both to squeal and jump back, pressing their backs against metal as though it would let them phase through it. With every turn the saber did to carve its way into the room, Newt could feel the blood drain from his face, no doubt turning his features into a disgusting orange color. Harko, to his immediate right, panted and trembled as though they were still caught in the tractor beam. The moments ticked away, the sizzling of a blade against steel continued and then stopped as the sword retreated. Newt and Harko looked at the door, then at one another and then back at the door, expecting it to explode from its carved hinges at any moment. Instead, it fell with a loud clank, the Jedi on the other end pushing it gently inward. The Neimoidians jumped again and huddled closer, staring at the door and then at the Jedi. If one could call this a Jedi. Though the robes of his order were present, they were buried under considerable amounts of armor plating covering most of his chest, shoulders, wrists, and feet. The armor was worn, with multiple signs of wear and tear. What robes could be seen were tattered and smudged with mud and who knew what else. With his graying hair tied behind into a bun, the Jedi's scarred, fierce features were fully visible to them. This usually didn't mean much to Newt. All humans looked the same. But this Jedi? He would remember the piercing gaze in his black eyes and enhanced several scars running down his face. The Jedi stood there, blades still activated, bathing the room with a green light. On each side, there were troopers standing ready, pointing blasters at them. Not clones, however. A Twi'lek and a Rodian, wearing the same cobbled-together armor as the Jedi. They seemed more like some isolated world's worthless militia force than a Republic strike team. Viceroy Gunray, Settlement Officer Harko, the knight spoke with a firm but pleasant voice, deactivating his blade and placing it onto his belt. His features eased somewhat as he and his men entered the room. "My name is General Ram Kota, I'm pleased to make your acquaintance." Before either Newt or Harko could do or say anything, his hands moved in a blur, producing a twin pair of shackles that ensured their hands with loud, almost deafening clicks. "And to place you under arrest." The hours seemed to stretch on into the length of days or weeks inside 500 Republica. Every interview was more droning and laborious than the last. Every suspect seeming less relevant to what truly mattered. Mace knew the reason why this feeling persisted with him since yesterday. Utapau was where the real battle was being fought, right at that same moment across the galaxy while he kept sitting on and would continue to for who knew how long. It was where the schemes of the Sith might finally be revealed along with the Jedi's true enemy. It was a feeling enhanced by his unique perception of the Force and all who existed inside it. The shatterpoints in 500 Republica were vanishing, carried like pebbles in the moving currents of the present. He didn't show this to anyone, of course. Every single person brought in for questioning received an equal amount of scrutiny from him. He had served the Order too long and too dutifully to let his personal annoyances interfere with this. Though he readily admitted it wasn't all on him, Kit Fisto made it infinitely easier. As one of the most approachable Jedi in the Order, Kit could get along with anyone or anything. If Obi-Wan was the man to ease tensions among all present parties, Kit was who you'd chat with in a cantina over whatever you wanted. A handful of times, back when the Clone Wars hadn't quite burned out their good humor, the Council would joke how Kit could probably talk down a battle droid into being his friend should the opportunity arise. One such person was their current subject for interview, the Republic's representative for the planet of Doro, Rulda. Despite his species being among the first spacefaring civilizations in galactic history, among the founding species for the Republic itself and suffering one of the worst examples of planet-wide destruction of any world in the Clone Wars so far, Doro and his species were under constant scrutiny. Non-human sentiment on Coruscant grew from day to day and from what Mace could perceive from her worried thoughts, infested even the Senate itself. The fact her species was quite close genetically and physically to Neimoidians wasn't helping matters. She entered looking pinkish, a sign of sickness or heavy unease though she hid nothing from them, answering every question with complete honesty. It certainly helped Kit started charming her almost immediately. Calling her lovely, complimenting a perfume Mace was convinced didn't exist and acting the perfect gentleman. If he wasn't absolutely certain of Kid's dedication to the Jedi tenets, Mace would have thought they'd have another Skywalker situation on their hands soon. Again, I do apologize for any interruption our conversation might have done in your schedule, he apologized for the third time, bowing his head. Rulder waved the apology aside, again. Oh no, no at all. I'm very happy to have participated, Senator De smiled, her complexion long since back to normal and a glint present in her red eyes. My people owe the Jedi much for helping to free our world. Helping you in this manner is the absolute least I can do. If you should need anything more, you will be the first to hear from us. Kit smiled wider, tone pleasant and sweet. Rulder and he didn't stop looking at one another until she was on the other side of the door, though her presence in the Force lingered there for a little while longer. Don't look at me like that. I'm not looking at you like anything. Yes you are, Kit faced him, his smile becoming wry. I can see that disapproving raised eyebrow of yours. This is how I look at everything. Must be annoying being so disapproving all the time, then. Mace's lip quirked in a tiny, genuine smile. He could see what Kit was doing and made his appreciation of the cheering up known with a respectful head bow. It was a brief respite, however. A floor below, Master T, who took up Anakin's role of the secret third interrogator and lie detector for lack of a better term, intensified his mental connection with Mace and Kit both. The last time he'd done it was just over half an hour ago when they'd received word Anakin and Obi-Wan had begun their fight with Grievous. Master Kota has sent word to Coruscant. Master T's already coarse voice sounded like two stones skidding against one another. His telepathic suggestion of separatist leadership proves it, Mace. You were right, it's Palpatine. Kit let out a rare, suffering sigh at the revelation. No, confirmation. Shaking his head and leaning against the chair. Through the Force, Mace could see the worry permeating throughout both of them. All three of them knew what this meant. The Sith had finally succeeded. They'd broken the Republic. They had done so well over 10 years ago and spent centuries beforehand building up to that moment. The rest of the galaxy just didn't know it yet, but they would soon, quite soon. For himself, Mace was more surprised by his lack of surprise. This eventuality was something he'd felt deep down for months prior, and his admission of this to the Council after Anakin's address had unexpectedly lessened what could have been a far more crippling blow. He did not feel the shock and pain of his one, secret love falling. He didn't even feel anger at himself or Palpa Sidious for this deception. The only thing Mace Windu felt at that moment was determination, to try and stop the Sith schemes if it was still possible, but more importantly, save the Jedi Order. He would not fail it as he failed the Republic. "Sisi," Mace spoke, breaking the silencing lingering between them. "Contact our strike teams around 500 Republica, tell them all to fall back to the temple and lock it down. Unless it's myself, Obi-Wan, Anakin or Master Yoda, no one is allowed in. Inform Shark T she is to intensify the evacuation. I want every single youngling left on Coruscant away within the hour. Do the same with our people protecting Senator Amidala. She cannot under any circumstances remain on this planet while that scheming Viper is still alive. Am I understood?" "You are, Master Windu." "May the Force be with you," the Ikhtaki Master replied, his resolve rallying from the tasks left at hand. With that he ended telepathic communication with them. Soon he and all the other Jedi on Coruscant would be in the relative safety of the temple. "Mace," Kit asked, still sounding concerned. "You aren't doing what I think you are, right?" "I am," the Quran Jedi replied in a tone brokering no argument. "He's killed enough of us already. No more. If I am the last Jedi to fall by his hand, then so be it. At least let me and a few others come with you. Perhaps we can even wait for Master Yoda to arrive and—" "We can't," Mace told him firmly, eyes peering past the mere physical walls of 500 Republica and across the planet to the Senate building itself. The point where suddenly all the miasma of the dark side was flowing out of with perfect clarity. Where every single shatterpoint that would determine the fate of thousands was hours, if not minutes away from disappearing. Peering at him from this distance, Mace could almost swear Sidious knew he was looking in that direction, allowing the Jedi Master a peek into what his enemy was truly capable of. Everything he's plotting is coming to a head, very, very soon. If what I see is correct, my Vapide may be one of the only things capable of defeating him. I'd believe that if Skywalker were here." "Yes," Windu admitted, letting a brief sigh. "So would I." In less than 20 minutes, The Jedi abandoned 500 Republica, in and outside. Through the Force, Mace could sense his fellow knights and masters converging to the temple, their presence growing dimmer and dimmer as the suffocating hold of the dark side seemed to pulsate more strongly. Kit was the last to leave, staying with Mace on the landing platform. The sun overhead was nearly gone, only a few more shimmers of orange light broke the night falling on Coruscant. Mace wondered with a gallow humor if Sidious planned this out as well. "Are you certain? Truly?" Kit asked again. "I am," Mace said without hesitation, and countering the grim, uncharacteristic look on the Nautolan Jedi's face, smiled. He extended a hand to him. "Take care of the Order while I'm away, Kit. I know you, Shark T, and the others can rise up to the task, no matter what." "What?" Nothing, Kit said, shaking his head and making his tentacles wave through the air. He shook Mace's hand. "It's just not like you to be so open? I was going to say sappy, but..." The two laughed, enjoying the feeling of camaraderie they might not share again. At least, in the physical world. "May the Force be with you, Master Windu. And you, Master Fisto." Watching his airspeeder turn into one of just millions of dots buzzing around the sky of Coruscant, Mace cast one final look at the Jedi Temple far in the distance. He allowed himself a few brief moments of reverie, of the time he first came there. Of the endless, boring at the time studies he had to do from spaceflight to history. His ascension through the ranks of the Jedi. Becoming a master in rank and practice. Training with Beepu and Sora. Making friends, losing others, and so very, very much more. The recollections were wonderful and painful in equal measure. And he let them vanish into the Force, clearing his mind to the here and now. The Senate building grew larger and larger the closer he flew. The sky darkening into dusk and then into full night on the way there, but the shadow of the place seemed to stand out even in those conditions. It was like staring into the maw of a gargantuan creature, gaping its mouth open at him in invitation. All of the shatterpoints reconfigured themselves to it, creating a weave of choices and consequences of cataclysmic implications in thousands of different directions. So many things that could go right or wrong. The upper landing bay, frequently used by members of the Order, was empty. In fact, the more Mace tried to sense out the presence of anyone except Sidious, the more it seemed the place was completely empty. That was good. It meant no innocents would come to harm. He could fight as hard as he needed to win this. Entering further into the buildings, the doors whooshing open at his approach, the atmosphere inside grew noticeably more malevolent. On the outside, all seemed as normal. On more than one occasion Sidious and the Council had to perform long meetings with one another in person. In all those times, Mace never saw anything amiss. Not even recently, when his suspicions of Palpatine's true allegiances became more pronounced. He wanted to smack himself for being so ignorant. From the blood-red carpets covering every floor to the very dim, yellow lights overhead enhancing the shadows rather than providing illumination, everything about the place screamed malevolence. An effect growing with each inch that closed the distance between Jedi and Sith. The doors to Sidious' office opened as easily as all the rest, the aforementioned cosmetic changes done to the building the most pronounced there. The yellow sage statues of Dwartii stuck out against the thick shadows around the office, almost watching his every move. Sidious wasn't at the main office, however, but to the private one to the right. Warily, lightsaber in hand, Mace crossed the empty room and into the hallway, at the end of which two more statues stood. To his right were more of Palpatine's trinkets, one of which was an engraved bas-relief of the Great Hyperspace War and an urn. Sith artifacts one and all and in plain sight. Mace shook his head. With a final whoosh, the doors to Palpatine's private office opened, revealing a far smaller room adorned with black and metallic colors, another open view of Coruscant at the far end of it, and a single desk with 3 chairs in front and one at the back. There sat Sidious, typing away at something or other and without a care or worry in the galaxy. Eventually, he deigned to acknowledge Mace's presence. With the same disarming smile and warm look in his eyes, Sidious did a remarkable job of looking genuinely surprised and happy to see Mace there. "Master Windu," he said, as though they were old friends who hadn't seen each other in years. "This is a surprise. Please, sit down. I trust you're here with news of the investigation, or perhaps Utapau?" "The former," Mace said, locking eyes with him. "I know everything." "Everything?" "Everything." Sidious sat there, tapping his desk gently with both index fingers. Then, He let out a small laugh unlike any Mace had heard from him before, and the big, open eyes he'd used to befriend so many narrowed into tiny, hateful orbs. The dark side around the room intensified as if all its black cloud around Coruscant was suddenly being sucked into the office, into Sidious. Mace held his ground, the darkness passing through without touching him. "Just as I have foreseen you would," Sidious said with a blandly pleasant voice. "No doubt Grievous is dead already. Unfortunate but necessary." "Not as necessary as what I'm about to do," Mace said, letting his saber become plainly visible from the sleeves of his thick robes. "Your schemes are over, you lying snake." When Mace's lightsaber snapped to life, something strange happened to Sidious. Instead of meeting the challenge, Sidious panicked. His hands withdrew from the desk and he reeled into the chair as though struck already. "Master Windu, what are you doing? Stop this!" He actually squealed, panting heavily. "Master Dooku, stop him!" At that moment, the holoprojector inside the room sprang to life, and there, almost lifelike in size, Count Dooku showed himself, appearing as regal as ever and lightsaber drawn for battle. With a snap hiss, he ignited it. "Master Windu, stop this," Dooku said, sounding like a holonet hero and even entering a guard stance as though he could actually fight Mace from afar. "The Chancellor and I are negotiating a peace. The surrender of the Confederacy. There is no treason here." "Listen to him, Master Jedi," Sidious said, pleadingly, sounding genuine. Like a frightened old man desperately pleading for his life. There was one thing that proved otherwise, the predatory smile on his face, the glint in his eyes saying "got you again." No doubt the entire room was bugged with camera footage and or recording devices feeding everything happening there to a safe location. Evidence of the enemy's making that would ensure the incrimination of him and likely the entire Jedi Order in a conspiracy to murder the Chancellor. Even if Mace won, Sidious' pawns would ensure it escaped and ruin the Jedi's already battered reputation, forever. If Mace chose not to fight at all, this Sith scum would butcher him and go about his plans. Mace couldn't help from clenching his saber hilt almost hard enough to bend it. Because Sidious was right. Once again, the Jedi lost before the fight even started by choosing to fight, period. And yet, the Sith scum made it impossible for them not to fight as well. The perfect Jedi trap, just like the Clone Wars. Well, if those were their circumstances, he would choose to fight. "No! No!" Sidious shouted again, more panicked than ever. "Murder! Treason!" Before Mace could even deliver the first blow, however, a blood-red saber sprang from his sleeves, cleaving the desk in half. Dooku's visage, smiling though with narrowed eyes, vanished. The Sith Lord blasted aside the desk to both ends of the room without a glance. Instead, he stared at his blade in admiration. "You've no idea," he said, eyes turning yellow as the blade mere inches from his face bathed him in red turned around in his fingers. "How long I've been waiting for this." There was a flash of movement, Sidious' body transforming into a blur of motion, mangling his features into a contorted monstrosity. Mace stood his ground and let it come to him and accepted the first strike with a blow, blocking it though it forced him back. Sidious struck, again and again, pushing Mace out of the room and into the hallway, their dancing blades almost carving the sage statues outside. The kind, elderly visage Sidious hid for decades proved the depths of its quality deception with each attack, striking Mace with the raw force of a man decades younger than either of them. His speed continued as a blur of motion, enhanced by the added room to breathe, transforming this blur into a leaping creature resembling Yoda himself. But Mace wasn't deterred by giving the Sith the initiative. He accepted every release of the dark side thrown his way, letting its energies empower him via Vapoid. Stoking the fire he'd always felt hidden deep within and decided to use for civilization. When Sidious' next strike came, Mace rushed to meet it, their weapons locking with such perfect force as they were both stopped dead in their tracks. The Sith merely smiled at the display, no doubt pleased that the real fight was nigh. Breaking the lock with a push, Mace swung his weapon overhead then unleashed a blinding circle of purple energy when Sidious inevitably darted under and tried striking again. However, Sidious didn't retreat, pushing his body back just enough to buy time for a precise jab, a crack in Mace's attack. Thanks to his shatterpoint perception, Mace spotted it first and halted the motion, sidestepping and trying to carve Sidious from his left kidney upward. The Darksider's own body twisted in a spin, taking him to safety and releasing a series of acrobatic blows Mace weathered then challenged head-on. The two soon left the hallway and entered the main office, where Mace was greeted by chairs flung in his direction. Knowing he couldn't attack or defend effectively with just one hand, Mace let the objects get closer before carving them to tiny, unusable pieces in another sweeping series of vapid strikes. The heavy atmosphere of the dark side thickened in the room considerably, drowning out the lights themselves until their sabers and the flashes of a lightning storm outside were the only light sources left. That and Sidious's piercing yellow eyes. In overhead stances, the two stood close to one another, waiting for who would make the first move. This time, they both became blurs of motion, darting around the room in every possible direction, striking with the force of battery guns and the speed of starfighters at one another. Every one of Sidious's blows seemed to boom with the dark side, and everyone Mace sent his way did the same, causing the very whooshes and hisses of their blades to transform into a macabre song. What Mace found worrying was how the shatterpoints seemed to diminish around Sidious. Earlier on, he was able to recognize the faults in Sidious or his technique, letting him exploit potential chances for victory. Yet, as the duel went on and the Sith seemed to unleash more and more of his power, the fault lines letting Mace see opportunities to win were disappearing right in front of him. The only fault lines left were the ones connecting Sidious to the fate of the Republic itself. His momentary, foolish lapse caused a grin to spread out on Sidious's face, and he just barely reacted in time to stop the torrent of Sith lightning from eviscerating him. Grinding his teeth and keeping his blade held high, Mace felt the pure surge of dark side power unlike any he'd encountered before batter against his lightsaber. Even the superconductive loop of vaporid was only capable of redirecting the power enough to keep fueling Mace's defense, not to counterattack. Soon enough, Mace felt his body push back further and further, until his back nearly touched one of the bronzium statues. That was when a lone shatterpoint appeared, and once again, he only narrowly avoided death when a second saber flew from inside the statue and right into Sidious's lightning-firing hand. Igniting it mid-leap, the Sith Lord came with a monstrous, guttural growl and renewed his assault, pushing both of them to the very edge of the window overseeing Coruscant around them. It was like fighting a human version of Grievous. Watching this being of pure flesh and blood move with speed, ferocity and seemingly infinite stamina thought impossible. But Mace would not allow himself to be deterred. Instead, he immersed himself deeper into vapid. Every single bloody thought of murder, anger, and hate sent by Sidious flowed into him as an ordinary Jedi let the soothing force in. He let these feelings burn away his surprise, his worry, and intensified his own counterattack. If the Sith Lord seemed to strike 12 times a second, Mace struck with 14. Then Sidious attacked with 20. Mace with 30. Any physical sensations he felt disappeared. Any pain from his joints, fatigue from his legs, and choking feeling from his lungs went entirely ignored. Mace was far too busy transforming himself into vapid. An endless stream of purple lightsaber slashes transformed their immediate vicinity into a tornado of impossible-to-follow motions. The two of them moving so quickly at the edge of the window, it seemed they were flicking in and out of existence. Mace's only concern was keeping the dark from touching him too closely, a single piece of calm in a maelstrom of pure battle. It was in the chaos of this battle, this inevitable showdown between Jedi and Sith, that Windu came to a realization after a while: he was going to lose. Despite all his years of training, decades of grueling self-discipline and mastery of a form created to counter even the greatest users of the dark side and to channel his own in service to the Order and Republic, it wasn't enough. No matter how deep he immersed himself into vapid, using every single bit of power Sidious threw at him with each saber slash, the Sith Lord just kept coming. Endlessly. Relentlessly. No matter what Mace did to cut him down, no matter how fast or strong, this thing wearing Palpatine's face in front of him responded with even more power. It was like staring into a black hole, not from the safety of a spacecraft, but lingering inches away from it. Staring at the gaping maw of pure nothingness, devouring every single shred of the force around it to endlessly strengthen itself. Even trying not to perceive the depths of this manifestation of the dark side was a useless gesture. Mace felt it profoundly every time he took it into himself and released it back outward in the superconductive loop that was their duel. It was cold. So very, very cold. Colder than any world he'd visited. Colder than even the vacuum of space which he had to fight in. It was a cold so chilling, Mace could feel his insides freeze. Every time the loop continued on, more and more of the power seeped into him, rattling his bones, making his teeth chatter. a frost so impossibly strong it soon burned. It would take more to stop such a power, more than Master Yoda's 1,000 years of practiced wisdom and battle prowess. More than Kenobi's pure expression of Jedi philosophy. Much, much more than a Jedi throwing the dark side back at itself. But he had no other choice. If he stopped now, Sidious blades would carve him to pieces. This inevitability didn't despair Mace, however. It gave him the strength to last as long as possible. Because for every single second he delayed this spiteful creature, every time he denied his lightsabers a winning stroke and kept him trapped in this seemingly endless loop of theirs, was another second his plans were being stalled. One more precious moment for Mace's fellow Jedi to escape, regroup and survive. This was the last thing Mace could do for them and for the people of the galaxy, and as every other duty so far in his life, he carried it out with pure will and determination. And when the chill of Sidious's sheer dark side power finally became too much for him, when even Mace's vapor had finally bent then broke, leaving him feeling exhausted, sluggish and frozen to the bone and left vulnerable for Sidious blades, Mace accepted it wholly. He didn't scream in pain, yelp or even flinch. Instead, he calmly and with utmost dignity accepted his impending death. Though he did take some measure of grim satisfaction at the last things he saw as a physical being. Smiling as the black hole of the Force quickly shrank to smaller and smaller sizes. All that was left was a very tired, very old-looking man staring down at him. His sadistic pleasure completely ruined.